this episode of Hello World, I'll dig into how the constant threat of war gave birth to the Israeli technology industry. And how Israel evolved into a technology giant, one with thousands upon thousands of cutting-edge startups. My journey will find me in Jerusalem, controlling an iPad with my eyes, in Tel Aviv, using this little guy to discover what's really in my food.
This is like some Star Trek.
And in Nazareth, I'll meet with a man that wants to make sure no one gets left behind in Israel's race to innovate. Silicon Valley may be home to some of the biggest tech giants in the world, but it's being challenged like never before. Crazy tech geniuses have popped up all over the planet, making things that will blow your mind. My name is Ashley Vance. I'm an author and journalist, and I'm on a quest to find the most innovative tech creations and meet the beautiful freaks behind them. Hello, world. The Israeli military dominates much of this country's culture. At 18 years of age, men and women head off for 2 to 3 years of required service. Kids who would be trying to locate the best kegger or sleeping through class in the United States find themselves here dealing with the most intense of situations. These young soldiers in the Israeli Defense Forces, or IDF, also learn to use some of the most advanced military technology around. To see how the IDF has given Israel a unique tech edge, I decided to check it out up close, to see the Iron Dome. I've traveled to Ashkelon, the coastal city just south of Tel Aviv that nudges up against the Gaza Strip.
What you were seeing here right now is the launcher. Each launcher has 20 missiles on it. You can see the red light flashing, which means it's armed and ready.
Here, one of the dozen or so Iron Dome batteries sits at the ready to intercept missiles and provide Israel with a type of shield from aerial attacks.
I'm the Iron Dome commander.
Lieutenant Colonel Liran Cohen oversees its operation.
Is this as close as we get, or do we get...
This is as close as we get.
It took just 3 years and about $200 million to develop this defense system. It relies on a radar that instantly detects when a missile has been fired. Algorithms quickly try to determine what type of projectile is in the air and whether it's heading for a populated or strategic area. If so, Iron Dome launches a missile of its own. It's said that Iron Dome has taken down more than 1,000 missiles since it turned on in 2011, with a 90% success rate. Some people question the accuracy of these figures. What's clear, though, is that the algorithms capable of directing projectiles while performing a cost-benefit analysis on human life are among the most advanced in the world. This network of launchers is highly mobile and constantly on the move. This site, like many, is temporary.
Everything you see here can be moved out in a matter of hours. And we move around a lot to make sure nobody knows where we are all the time.
Unless you live here, it's difficult to imagine just how much this technology has transformed the lives of ordinary Israelis.
I can tell you from my own personal experience, sitting in my own house and seeing rockets fired towards my house and operating this incredible system and succeeding. With the Iron Dome, when you see your house that you're protecting and your family and your friends and your soldiers, it's a sense of great sense of pride.
For many Palestinians, Iron Dome means something else. It's just the most visible part of an expansive Israeli security apparatus. that includes drones, checkpoints, and espionage technology. Those tools have been put to immediate use in the West Bank, Gaza, and throughout Israel. Terrorist bombings have declined, missiles have met their match. But lower-tech forms of protest, like stabbings, are now on the rise. What's been remarkable is the speed at which young Israelis take these types of high-tech tools and then privatize them once they leave the army. Be it peacetime or war, Israeli innovations pop up throughout the world. Coming up next on Hello World, we'll check out an IDF-inspired startup that wants to send laboratories to space.
Why do people want to do experiments in space?
Every day our life is dominated by this lens of gravity. We remove that lens of gravity and we learn something new.
Forget dull strip malls and office parks. The startups of Tel Aviv come to life here in the city's vibrant neighborhoods. They feed off the city's energy, and the employees have a chance to escape their cubicles and live a little. I came here to meet one of the people that shaped the Israeli startup lifestyle. Shlomo Kramer served in the IDF almost 25 years ago, and his first company, Checkpoint, invented the freaking firewall.
We always had the startup bug, so we always talked about stuff that we will do afterwards, and it was always around startups.
Like a lot of Israel's tech elite, Shlomo got his start with Unit 8200, a top branch of the IDF.
Group 8200, right,
Right.
is this famous part of the IDF that, I guess, equivalent to NSA in the United States.
It was like the bedrock of everything else that I've done afterwards. As a 22, 23-year-old, I was the head of a unit, of 20 people, very high responsibility. I was, making decisions in millions of dollars. And
The IDF functions sort of like a never-ending networking event. The first question at a cocktail party is what unit you served in. For members of Unit 8200, these ties have led to Israel dominating the market for security software and hardware.
What makes Israel so well suited to startups and technology?
Israel is itself is a startup. Tel Aviv, there was 100 years ago, there was nothing. And everybody kind of grows up with the feeling that there was this Zionist that came in and created something out of nothing, which is the concept essentially of startups.
Sure.
There's always an infusion of new talent from the IDF. And the infusion of talent, you've got the recipe for a successful startup nation.
Yeah.
Shlomo has invested in dozens of Israeli companies. To see the extreme end of what the IDF can inspire, I've gone to Herzliya, a small beach town and tech hub that brushes right up against Tel Aviv. It's here that a company called Space Pharma has set out to make some interstellar drugs.
If humanity would like to move out of Earth, they must learn the microgravity conditions in order to survive on the way to Mars and to other places. Florida is...
CEO Yossi Yamin used to head up the IDF satellite program. Then, he and his comrades hit on a big, possibly profitable idea. They assembled some space, software, and science experts and set to work trying to make life easier on astronauts.
We cut the middleman. The astronaut is not the scientist. He needs to survive, he needs to eat, he needs to train, he needs to sleep. He cannot do too much science.
Space Pharma has built a shoebox-sized laboratory that will hitch rides into orbit on rockets from companies like SpaceX. The goal is to shrink down state-of-the-art scientific equipment and automate how it runs experiments. This would allow a great deal more science to take place on the International Space Station.
So we're gonna go in the lab
Okay.
here.
Thank you for the booties.
You're very welcome. So it's a pretty small bio lab, but the equipment's big. And this you can't bring to space. So the whole idea of what we're trying to do and what we're really going to look at is how we take this equipment and bring it down to the small scale.
A typical laboratory has refrigerator-sized machines, microscopes, pipettes, and a host of liquids and chemicals. It's a very manual, messy process that's tough enough to pull off here on Earth.
We just looked at all that large equipment. This is what we fitted in.
Research done on the ISS has already led to the development of new drugs and insights about organisms. Molecules floating about freely in solutions can behave more naturally than when they're smeared flat on a petri dish.
Every day our life is dominated by this lens of gravity. What goes up must come down. We remove that lens of gravity and we learn something new.
Space Pharma wants to use its machines to let companies and researchers conduct dozens of different kinds of experiments, and to see what space can teach us. To pull myself out of the clouds and learn more about Israel's startup culture, I went for a walk on the beach back in Tel Aviv with another local tech legend.
Shalom. Welcome to Israel.
Thank you very much. Thanks for
Armed with a law degree and an MBA, Adi Sofer-Tehani had led a number of young companies and helped spur on Israel's technology economy. Now, she runs Facebook's Israel operations.
Today we have something like 5,300 startups in Israel. By the way, there's no one country in the world that has that amount of startups except the US.
US, yeah.
Okay,
It's not even close.
And
yeah.
1,400 new startups in 2015. 1,400 new startups.
Women must serve alongside men in the military here. Adi once hoped to fly jets, but because of the gender restrictions at the time, she ended up evaluating who could become a pilot. She sees the time in the Air Force as crucial to her career.
What's the uniqueness of the female experience in Israel because of the military service? It must have some long-term effects.
Yeah, I absolutely think it does. Women in Israel probably start their career life with more confidence, with the feeling that they also can. But are we done in Israel in terms of women taking part? No, we are not. And I think that in Israel we're probably, because of the military, because of Startup Nation, because of the culture, I think that we are probably closer to achieve that, but we are definitely still not there.
Next up, I travel to Jerusalem and visit a startup that puts a new twist on peering into the future.
It's a little disorienting at first to try and play a video game just by moving your head.
This is the Port District of Tel Aviv. It's a popular shopping area and the perfect place to meet up with Dror Sharon, a former member of the Air Force, and now the founder of Consumer Physics. The company raised $2.7 million via a huge Kickstarter campaign so that it could produce a device called the Sayo, which may soon change the way we shop for groceries.
When you think about it, how do you make your selection today?
Grab it and feel how firm it is.
So it's good, but you know, you might want to have some scientific backing to what you're doing.
Right.
The Sayo replaces your grandmother's squeeze test. Sorry, Grandma. To tell you the best cucumber or tomato to pick. In an instant, it displays the food's calorie, fat, and sugar content. It's the quickest way to finding the perfect potato.
That's cool. It's really cool.
And you can actually train yourself,
I mean,
right?
this is like some Star Trek
The spectrometer usually looks like this. It's a big old hunk of scientific gear that can peer into things and determine their properties. Rather incredibly, the Sayo shrinks much of the same technology down onto a chip. It zaps an object with near-infrared light, stirs up its molecules, and tells a story about the object. As people go around zapping things with the Sayo, the objects get put into a database. This then becomes a giant log of all the materials in our world. That sounds all well and good. But how would the Sayo fare against one of mankind's most mysterious creations?
This is the cheese test. Good old American Velveeta. On the label, it's
290. Here it's 300.
So it's almost spot on.
Yeah,
and what's the fat percentage on the
23.
label? 23, and you're 25.
The Sayo's value should go well beyond kumquats and industrialized cheese. It can help farmers decide when to harvest their crops. It can detect watered-down fuel at shady gas stations. And it can tell real medicine from fake pills.
When you think of healthcare, actually, it's not about what you're buying. It's actually tracking your well-being over time.
Okay.
And instead of sending stuff to the lab, you'll actually be able to measure it on yourself.
Dror even sees a future for this device in your bathroom.
You can measure teeth, you can measure saliva, you can measure hair, you can measure urine, you can measure the other things. So, I mean, there's a ton of stuff, and people are telling us that they're going to use it for clinical trials.
So I'm going to take my smartphone into the toilet and...
Well, it'll be probably inside your toilet already.
All right, yeah, that makes sense.
From the cosmopolitan coast, I climb the winding mountain road to Jerusalem. Tel Aviv may be the beating heart of the Israeli tech world, but most Jews consider Jerusalem to be the country's soul. And you know what they say about the soul.
If you think about it, the most basic thing of human communication is eye contact. By the device seeing you, you get a whole nother world of interaction.
The window to the soul.
Exactly, the window to the soul or the window to the brain. Look around, look to the right, look to the left.
Yitzi Kempinski is the co-founder and CEO of YouMove, based here in Jerusalem. The company has developed a way to replace eye-tracking gear that usually costs tens of thousands of dollars with algorithms that can run on an iPad or smartphone.
It's a little disorienting at first to try and play a video game just by moving your head. So you see head movement, eye movement, iris movement, blinks, and then
an analysis of that.
Kempinski hopes the technology will give us new, rapid insights into conditions like concussions.
So this is like when they shine the white light that you have to follow. I mean, you see doctors doing that, right?
Exactly. And then based on the score, we can tell if I have a concussion and I don't.
You don't have one.
I don't have a concussion.
Kempinski thinks that these hard science applications with real-world uses distinguish Israel's tech scene, especially for Jerusalem startups.
People are looking for, real deep tech. You can't say, I'm, making an app for taking pictures of food. You have to give a real explanation to your Jewish grandmother about what is that for?
This is the Damascus Gate.
It's not that far at all from where we were earlier today. There's a sniper up in the window who's guarding against a lot of the recent stabbings that have been going on. Jerusalem's trying to turn into a technology city, and this is the reality of how these businesses have to come to life in this type of environment.
The moment you step into Jerusalem, it's clear that the city carries with it the weight of thousands of years of history. Everyone in the Middle East, and by extension the world, has their eyes fixed here. On Al-Aqsa Mosque, on the Wailing Wall, on the spot where it's believed Jesus was crucified. This is a small spot of land with outsized global importance. Under heavy guard, carved into minute slices, and fortified with walls. Those barriers went up to curb violence based on ancient disputes. Seen another way, they've become blockades that hold back modern opportunity. I traveled north, from Jerusalem to Nazareth, the largest Arab enclave in Israel, a place with a laid-back vibe and a very specific flavor.
We can see here 10 or 15 places just for shawarma. So because of that, I call it the Shawarma Valley.
Shawarma Valley.
You have the Silicon Valley, we have the Shawarma Valley, and we are at the middle of the Shawarma Valley.
That's Fadi Swadan. He opened Israel's first Arab tech accelerator, and he knows everyone in town.
كيف الحال؟ شو أخباركم؟
Arabs do not have to serve in the military and lack the tech connections supplied by the IDF. Fadi is set to work trying to fix this and to help Arab engineers benefit from Israel's tech boom. In a controversial move, he's linking them up with the tech moguls who have come out of the IDF's Unit 8200, the spooky security and espionage folks.
Anyone is going out of the 8200, first thing is thinking about is to make a startup. The 8200 graduates have a special NGO that helps them. At our community, it's not so popular to have startup because it's a new industry. It's very risky.
Fadi's a rebel. He was the only Arab in his class at the Technion, Israel's elite technical university. Inside of this building, he shepherded dozens of like-minded engineers. They're building software, consumer services, and hardware in an effort to make sure that the Arab-speaking world has the latest and greatest technology.
I think if we can be part of the ecosystem in Tel Aviv and to be part of the startup nation, we can raise the standard of life of the Arab community here.
Because Israel is known as this startup nation, but it's left out a big chunk of people so far.
Exactly. There's two communities, the Arabs and the Jewish Orthodox. The government now is putting some money to find the ways how to engage them with a startup nation here, because they believe that if we are not part of that, the startup nation will be somehow slowed here, and it cannot continue to be the second place after the Silicon Valley.
A handful of his companies have already taken off and made headway in billion-dollar industries, but it's proven tough for them to find investment dollars. There's a clear bias against Arab companies, and many of their backers have opted to remain anonymous or to funnel their investments through offshore accounts. But Fadi remains optimistic.
I hope in the coming years maybe we have big success stories, let's say. The first unicorn startup from the Arab community maybe here in Israel, so this maybe can attract more and more entrepreneurs to be part of that and attract Arab businessmen to be part of this industry.
To visit Israel, though, is to experience the extraordinary. So many parts of our nature, joy, conflict, conformity, and imagination, swirl around together in confounding and inspiring ways. I'm not sure that anyone will really ever make sense of all this, but it's spectacular to witness and feel, even if just for a short while.